It is said that when the first usurper came face to face with either 7 or 8 dragon sovereigns all by its lonesome, it let out a sigh, chuckled, and said, "Huh, this is it." You see, the sovereigns believing that because they had outnumbered this otherworldly intruder, they would surely be able to repel it, but what happened next was miraculous. The usurper proceeded to even, beat, then smash the odds, not by calling on help from beyond, but by simply going, "I just need some more me's." It then created the most powerful group Teyvat has ever seen, enforcers of its will, and holding dominion over the fundamental aspects of existence. They were emanations. You see, emanations derived from the greatest being who ever lived. I'll say it again. Emanations derived from the primordial one, a progenitor god, hailing from beyond the stars. And it was then with these 5 individuals that they proceeded to beat the baby back bitch out of the sovereigns, who then turned to a life of drugs following their defeats. You hate to see it. I've said it before and I'll say it again. When I hear heavenly principles, I am personally led to believe that it refers to not just the primordial one, but also to the 4 shades. I believe it's the will of these 5 deities. That's the natural order and laws of this world. And it boils down to 2 things. 1, the shades help to create the world. And 2, the shades are in part of the primordial one. That was a lot of parts. But we'll talk about all this later. First, we must discuss who are the 4 shades and what are they all about? As mentioned earlier, the shades are gods derived directly from the primordial one itself to aid in battle versus the sovereigns. Quote, "When the eternal throne of the heavens came, the world was made anew. Then the true Lord, the primordial one, came forth and did battle against the 7 terrifying sovereigns, dragon lords of the old world. The primordial one created shining shades of itself, and the number of these shades was 4. It's at this point all but confirmed. The shades each represent the artifact archetypes: life, time, Enethem, death, and reason. Enethem here just meaning void/space. Istaroth is the only confirmed shade we know of, being the god of time and wind. We have a heap of information on her, but most of it paints her in a very, very sketchy light. We need to do an investigation on this bitch. She motherfucker forgot what she was fighting for. She was apparently the only one who didn't forsake the Ankonomians and gave Abrax the knowledge to build the Danichi Mikoshi. The other notable thing she did was help Makoto create the sacred Sakura that let her do some extremely very suspect things.
Eternity extends time into infinity. Dreams illuminate each moment within. When both shine in unison, the sacred Sakura blooms from the darkness, finally free from the clutches of the heavenly principles.
Free from the clutches of the heavenly principles? Why would you want to leave? What you want, Istaroth? What you doing, nigga? Istaroth has a long history of being worshipped, first by the Ankonomians for saving them, and then by Mondstadt. She was worshipped alongside Barbados for a time, before she seemingly vanished from the annals of history, with very few knowing of her existence at all anymore. But one common saying does still allude to her even today.
Seeds of story, brought by the wind.
And cultivated by time. Did Paimon just unconsciously complete that saying?
What do you mean by that?
The next shade we have information on is the Shade of Life, who really all we know is, she's a female. And I mean, as her title suggests, she really likes creating life. Following the defeat of the Sovereigns, she was given the responsibility of ordering life. As when Nervalet inherited the memories of the original Hydro Sovereign, he remembered, quote, "These birthing waters might not be of any special importance to humans, but for Nervalet, he can differentiate every drop, every minute memory. He still remembers the foreign usurper appointing their own god of life to order the living. He still remembers how the usurper made her to suppress the original vital force of this planet. And of course, he also knows how she came to commit the original sin." Yeah, fucking Vietnam flashbacks, reliving this shivering in a corner. Bitch ass nigga. And creates life the Shade would, as in the next 400 years following the defeat of the Sovereigns, quotes, "The mountains and rivers were made, and the seas and oceans accepted those who rebelled and those who would not kneel. The primordial one, and one of its shades created the birds of the air, the beasts of the earth, and the fish of the sea. Together, they also created flowers, grass, and trees, before finally creating humans, our ancestors, numerous as the stars in the sky, uncountable as the sand on the shore. Her magnum opus, however, would come in the form of the first Hydro Archon, Egeria. Quote, "When that first heart was removed, the envoy of Celestia, the leader upon whose shoulders lay the duty to create life, came out to the great primeval sea, and there she created another heart. That heart had nobility unto a dragon, but lacked its outer form, and had the majesty of a god, yet was bereft of any divine duty. And though it was created by a ruler of humans, its substance and essence were all original matter from this world, entirely without outside elements." You know, it's weird. The way this paragraph makes it sound in conjunction with Nervalets, you'd think Egeria was created really early on, just because why wait to separate the Hydro Sovereign from the Primordial Sea? But if Egeria really is that ancient, I mean, that would make her quite possibly one of the oldest beings ever. Then how is the earliest recorded evidence of her existence in Remuria, which isn't really that old of a civilization? I'm sure we'll find out next batch. As for the other shades, we've got not a damn thing about them. The best theories right now are that the Shade of Void is our beloved sustainer of heavenly principles, given she looks a lot like the Hersher of Void. Yeah, crazy, right? And that the Shade of Death might be Columbina, given death is represented by a plume, which we see an abundance of on her, combined with the fact that her personality reflects death, or the cycle of life in the Lazo trailer, as she's seen nearest to the coffin, but then later on inquires about Dottore segment, calling it the prime of his life.
I must say, you're looking very young today, Doctor.
You know very well that I do not take that as a compliment.
So, where's the segment in the prime of his life, then?
So, when you take into account that in the trailer, Columbina has essentially been referred to in all three stages of life, young, prime, and death, yeah, you can see why people think as such. But as for the official information regarding these two, zip nada. The reason domain for those wondering is in all likelihood the primordial one's given it's a crown, and he's the master of the four shades and the usurper king. Or, you know, this is just a crack idea, shout out sovereigns. It's a shade who got diddled from history featuring Irminsul. What's interesting about the shades is, aside from the dominion they have over the fundamental aspects of existence itself, they're also connected to an element, namely Istaroth and wind and the shade of life and water. What's even more strange is the fact that both of these shades appear to have some connection with two of the original 7 archons. While we know for a fact the Shade of Life created Egeria, Venti's connection with Istaroth, while less clear, is still there, as Barbados is said to have once come from the Thousand Winds. Quote, "In those days, Venti was but a single thread of the Thousand Winds that roared through the northern lands." The Thousand Winds obviously being another name for Istaroth, the Thousand Winds of Time. The problem is, as it stands right now, you know, the connection just dies there. Ruka Devata, for instance, is an avatar of Irminsul with no known connection to a shade, and Makoto also has no connection with one. With regards to the other shades' possible elements, I think symbolically speaking, the Shade of Death probably has control of fire, and as for the Shade of Void, this one's tricky. Given the elements is probably Earth, however, the closest elements we have to that in Teyvat is either Dendro or Geo, take your pick. If the sustainer is the Shade of Void, then we have a problem, because this damn sure not no goddamn Dendro or Geo. It could be, however, she can simply use different elements, but I mean, if we're going to be honest, what the fuck even is this? This looks like nothing we've seen before, not even a power from beyond. And so what is this? Maybe she is corrupted by the forbidden knowledge here, who knows, and as such, she's warped one of her elements. Wouldn't that be something? As for the Crown of Reason wielded by the Primordial One, its elements could be spirit/ether, shown by the imaginary element, which has obviously yet to make an appearance in Teyvat. Circling back to the earlier point about the heavenly principles being the shades and the Primordial One, I say this because Nahida referred to the sustainer as the heavenly principles.
I'm sure you remember the entity that changed your fate. The Heavenly Principles. In fact, the Heavenly Principles has been quiet since the Conria disaster 500 years ago.
before then stating the first descender was probably the heavenly principles.
My current hypothesis is that the first descender was likely what we now call the heavenly principles.
This is despite the fact that the sustainer referred to herself as the sustainer of heavenly principles and not the heavenly principles themselves. It's fairly agreed upon the first descender is the primordial one. However, if the sustainer is a shade of Phanes, then she is in essence also the primordial one, given the shades are directly derived from it. A shade is at the end of the day a shadow. Nahida wouldn't know this, obviously, because there's no information on the heavenly principles in Irminsul, and she's never interacted with the heavenly principles. So it makes sense her answer was, how do I say, incomplete from what we know. Or it could be, I'm wrong, who knows? Well, Jesus knows, and God, and Buddha, and Allah.